Right. I'm not going to run away.
No, please don't. Give me a minute to start us off.
All right.
So I want to, can the tech team say if we're good to go?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to wait for the tech team. Patrick, are we good to go?
All good.
Thanks. Great. So warm welcome to everyone here to our 17th and final USAf Helm Engage for the year. Today we have Professor Barney Pityana with us, and I will introduce him in a minute. Professor will speak about looking back into the future of higher education, and he will give us his thoughts on leadership, on where we've gone right, where we've come right, and where we perhaps lost our way a little bit. And I hope he will shed some light on all of it. So warm welcome to everyone here in the room, especially warm welcome to you, Professor, as I said, and I'll introduce you in a minute. Just a quick recap for the year. We had 6 engages for the year. We started off in, I think it was March. We started off with Professor Andre Keertz and Dr. V.P. Val from the Free State speaking about their national research on student-centered university. We then had Professor Salim Badat speaking about issues around global north, global south, hegemonies and knowledge sets, and how we import knowledge sets and the risks of doing that, and how important it is to find our own voice. We then had Professor Kopano Ratele speaking to us about masculinities, and he zoomed in from Stellenbosch, and those of you who were here recall how difficult it was to get that connection going. He spoke about masculinities, and particularly around teaching socialization, and where some of the ways are that we've gone wrong, so horribly wrong in the country in some ways. Then we had Professor Andre Keertz from the head of the strategy group at USAf speaking to us about his research on national transformation of the higher education sector, together with Professor Thierry Lusha, Bongani Montwango, and Zama Mtombeni, speaking to us about their research. And again, here, it was also a fascinating report to hear how the sector has transformed over the year, and particularly where some of the highlights are of that. Then last week, we had Professor Loyiso speak with us about pipelines of emerging scholars and emerging academics, and how we can use that as a tool for steering transformation. And today, we are most honored to have Professor Pityana with us, looking back and looking forward. So just a quick one before I introduce him. We will spend the hour listening to his thoughts, and then we'll have some questions. So please pop your questions into the chat. I've got questions already now that I want to hear his thoughts on. In terms of his bio, Professor Nyameko Barney Pityana is the retired principal and Vice-Chancellor of the University of South Africa, UNISA. He currently serves in honorary positions as the Deputy President of the Academy of Sciences of South Africa, that's ASA, and the General Secretary of the Network of African Academics in the Sciences. In 2006, the then President Thabo Mbeki awarded him the Grant Counselor of the Baobab in that year's Presidential Honours List. He's Emeritus Professor of Law at UNISA and an honorary visiting professor in philosophy in the Ellen Gray Center for Ethical Leadership at Rhodes University in Grahamstown. Professor Pityana has degrees in law from the University of South Africa and theology from King's College in London and the University of Cape Town, where he obtained his PhD in religious studies. He trained for the Anglican ministry in Oxford and served in parishes in the Church of England before moving to Geneva in 1988. He has published extensively in theology, human rights law, as well as higher education management and leadership. Professor Pityana is an outstanding and noticeable human rights academic and activist, and a speaker of truth to power in the South African higher education landscape. And he's a voice we very much need to listen to and hear. So, Prof, over to you. We are most honored to have you here, and we're looking forward to your talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Streiber. Thank you very much to be here among colleagues. I was just listening to that list of honorables who've participated in this engaged, and I kind of feel that I'm in very, very good company. even though it is not without shaking about what the expectations are. I just want to take about 20-25 minutes of your time, really just to reflect on higher education as I see it today, where we come from, where we might go going forward. I've not been, I was Vice-Chancellor of UNISA until 2010, so I've been out of the system for a pretty long time, but it actually gives you a very good vantage point of actually looking in from outside into the higher education system. But at the same time, I'm very active in the higher education sector over a whole range of things. One of them is that, as you have said, Dr. Schreiber, I serve as an honorary professor at Rhodes University's Department of Philosophy. I also, as it were, I heard you mention Professor Andre Kiert's name. I serve in his unit as an honorary professor as well of critical studies in higher education. But of course, I have also been involved in other aspects of higher education. Unfortunately, with so many breakdowns in higher education in our country, I have served as an independent assessor where there's been breakdowns of governance that the minister has asked me, among many other colleagues who have done that work. And therefore, I have a sense of a view of higher education, a lot of it quite critical, and some of it not always welcome and popular. But I'm in the process right now to really worry and concern about where are we going as a country and as a nation. And among these issues are issues of higher education. Where we are at the moment is the questions arise because there does appear that currently there are major issues in higher education management and leadership that we have to contend with as a country. Almost every year, but more recently, there was an issue about NSFAS funding, which was really intended to be a means by which the most needy students in our higher education institutions can get assistance to qualify and complete their degrees. But an assessment needs to be made as to what impact NSFAS has given to higher education in the time when it has been in operation. I believe it's likely to be a mixed bag of what we see. At the same time, there's been a recognition that so many young people in South Africa and their families have become very dependent on NSFAS. Hence the tragedy of the uproar that was there when the NSFAS changed their systems and some students were not able to get assistance that they needed. Besides that, there have been issues, sadly and unfortunately, around the leadership of the vice-chancellors, the quality of leadership. There's been issues also about governance in higher education institutions, the relationship between management and governance in our universities today. And it seems to me, from where I stand, that that has become quite a worrying prospect in much of our higher education institution today. I'll touch on that in some detail a little bit later. So the issues of governance have become quite prominent. Unfortunately, some of it involves my universities as well, like the University of South Africa, that are an alumni and a former Vice-Chancellor, as well as the University of Cape Town, where I'm also an alumni. But at a different level, University of Fort Hare, which is also my university, is demonstrating to us a different kind of problem that universities are opening themselves to safety and security at universities, where more recently there is reason to believe, and some people are on trial for having conspired to murder university executives, and are on trial for that. That would have been unheard of before. But also other forms of security have been prominent. Last week, students were killed at Fort Hare because students were fighting, and there is accusations as to whether students are safe at our higher education institutions. We've heard a lot about GBV issues in our institutions, including rape, and the lack of safety of our women students and young people at our universities is a matter that has been held up a great deal. Now, when I go through all of that, it all sounds very negative and extremely worrying. But we ought to be balancing that against the achievements of the higher education system in our country. And I think I'm one to say that as I spend a lot of time around universities, not only have we established new universities, but 2 other universities are bound to be established. 2 medical schools are now new and have been established in our country. So there's been some progress. And universities are expanding. All the universities are having infrastructure developments that are being put in place. At the same time, many academics may well feel that not enough acknowledgement is being made of the output, research output that comes out of South African universities, which of course was lauded the world over around COVID, for example. Our scientists are prominent and well-known all around the world, and they are being honored in different parts of the world. So there is a sense in which I think the Minister of Higher Education was right in saying that we're not acknowledging sufficiently the scientific output that comes from our higher education institution. I have no intention of ignoring that at all. But it is important that we hear what is the case. Now, having laid that out in the way I have done, it is important for us to understand that almost 30 years on, since the Higher Education Commission of 1995 was established, and out of which the Higher Education Act was enacted in 1997. We're almost 30 years now down the line. And the environment is very, very different from what it was in 1995. The political and social and economic situation in the country is very, very different. But the mood, the ethical and moral mood in our country is also very, very different. It will be recalled that in 1995, when the Commission produced its report, there was a great deal of positivity about South Africa. There was a sense in which South Africans were in the process of creating something for themselves and for the world. And indeed, we were at a point as a country where we really appreciated what we have been unable to give for such a long time in the creation of our own society, of our own country, and contributing to the well-being of the world. Our constitution was, in fact, adopted by Parliament, our final constitution in 1996. And we had at that point, at the helm of our country as president, and Nelson Mandela, who was seen to be an international figure and a statesman of note. At that point, the role of higher education was spelled out very, very clearly both in the Act as well as in the in the Act as well as in the Commission report that was passed. And of course, following that, in the white paper number 3. So higher education was a very important instrument, not just for the transformation of our society, but for the building up of a new society in our country, something that we believed in many ways was new and was going to be different from years of apartheid that we went through. And that was marked, I want to suggest, in 2 particular ways in the Commission report and indeed in the Higher Education Act. The first was the affirmation that the role of higher education is to contribute to the well-being of society and the well-being of all South Africans. Secondly, higher education was an instrument for transformation of our society. And finally, for purposes of my address today, higher education was a very critical component of ensuring that there's massification of higher education. In other words, the access to higher education, the doors of higher education must be opened, if you like, almost as the Freedom Charter was saying. And we went into the Act with those principles in mind, to make sure that we provide a higher education that contributes to the well-being and developmental nature of our society. Secondly, to provide means of access to as many South Africans as were needed to do so. And finally, we needed it to become a tool, an instrument for transformation of our society. And those principles in different ways were in the Higher Education Act as well. And indeed, I'd like to suggest that they are in the Constitution. The preamble to the Constitution, just for an example, I won't dwell on this. The preamble to the Constitution, if you like, sets out, I think, what I regard as an important high-level principle, that we adopt this Constitution to improve the quality of life of all citizens and to free the potential of each person. And that just about summarizes what higher education was about and what is in fact is contained in the Higher Education Act, especially in the preamble to the Higher Education Act. Now we've gone that way. We've now got the Act. And it is important for us to see where are we today? Why today, if I may analyze, there are just probably 3 concerns that are prominent about higher education today. The first one, if I may say so, is the recognition that in an economic environment that we have, in the social, moral breakdown that there is in our society today, what is the contribution of higher education to what had been expected of it in the upbuilding of the quality of life of our people in our country, and the assertion that higher education will provide the tools for the transformation of our society and in its upbuilding. One of the reasons for this is not only just a society and an economy that has been unable to employ as many people that we can and be responsive to the growth in our community and in our society. The poverty levels that our country is wallowing under at this time is a matter of concern. Why it is that the concern about so many graduates that come out of our universities are unable to find jobs or employment, let alone are unable to be equipped with the skills and capacity to be self-employing and generating knowledge and industry that could contribute towards our economy, rather than graduates that are expecting to be employed in order to earn a living. At the same time, is it not about whether higher education has contributed sufficiently to the creation of the kind of society that our Constitution and the Higher Education Act premised and promised for our society as well, both premised and promised. And the disillusionment at times in some of the circles that I go in about whether it is worth, higher education is worth the costs and the resources that are being put it. And I don't want to be misunderstood. There can never be enough resources any country can make to higher education. The more, the merrier, and the higher value of research funding that is made available, and of training of men and women that is there, and of education of our people. There could never be enough of that. But there are questions that are being asked about whether indeed higher education is a contributor sufficiently worthy of the resources that are put into higher education in our country today. It is in the light of those questions that I put out the issues that I see us confronted with as the higher education community that we are. In particular, the exodus that has been recorded of young graduates from South Africa, and no longer white graduates, by the way, and professional skills of young people who leave South Africa, doctors, lawyers, accountants, graduates who are going to other countries in North America, in Europe, and indeed in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, is a matter that any society should be raising and being concerned. Why is it? And what concerns me is that I don't think from government and elsewhere questions are being raised as to what can be done to retain the skills and the knowledge and the education that has been produced. Not enough is being done to make sure that there are openings for young people in this country to develop from their education and their professional expertise and to contribute back to the building up of our society today. Not enough of that is being done. And I fear that there can be no nation that can afford for much longer to take the exodus of skills of the magnitude that we are recorded to be losing in South Africa today. The second point I want to say I am concerned about, and this is the point I'm making. It is to say that beyond transformation, beyond massification, beyond access, beyond the constitutional values and the rights that we have, important as those might be, are we creating in our country, in our societies, graduates sufficient enough for us to say we are building what Steve Biko called this quest for a new humanity, a kind of people who are proud of who they are as South Africans and are net contributors to the knowledge and industry that our society can afford and must produce and have its place in the world. And I say that in the light of everybody else, there are questions about this. Because if they were not, what I started with at our universities, because that's where it starts, or broad, starts at home, in our community, wherever it was, but the universities don't seem to be contributing anything much differently from that. By this, I mean that, and I'm recorded as having said, there is a danger that we might be, as universities, instead of producing scholars and intelligentsia, we are in danger of producing negatives and thuggery society of violent people who really may well be intelligent and scientists and all of that. But at the human level, what kind of people are we able to make available to our society for its development? If that is so, has it got something to do with what we teach or what we fail to teach to our young people in our societies today? To put it differently, have we not been probably transfixed in an idea of the university that probably speaks less to our human condition and social condition today than it does to what is happening in the world out there? We said in the act that to promote research and knowledge that befits international levels and standards. But what Fees Must Fall has done to our country, that we do well to reflect, was to bring us back to some of the basic issues that we might have overlooked in our pursuit of international recognition of our higher education. And there are two things probably I want to highlight. The first, was it not that we may have missed out on what they call decolonization, Africanization, and that we are creating, if you like, enveloping our young people with this idea of being what they are not? This kind of so-called colonial European ways of thinking and knowledge and doing. And quite frankly, neither the Act nor the Constitution can ever be able to do. How is it that we can become as South Africans? What does it mean to become a South African today? What Fees Must Fall has asked us to do is to really look beyond the contours of transformation that we're doing, look at our demographics of Black and women and people with disability, to begin to look at the content of what is it that happens at our university to grow and to produce men and women of substance, who are the ones who are going to produce the kind of society that we want. That's the first thing that they are doing. And that's the first thing that is now being engaged in our world today. The second one I want to suggest draws from that. And this is what I was at Rhodes University recently at the Alan Gray Center, for Leadership Ethics, was about how do we humanize, how do we make men and women more deeply human in their approaches to learning, to knowledge, to intelligentsia, to society, and the way in which they engage themselves in the way that they do. And I think those questions arise. Here is the thing. What has happened recently And this is more a diagnostic rather than an analytical statement. There is a breakdown in the way in which the vision of a higher education system that is stakeholder-based. The idea of having a governance system of the university that is based on the academics and people of expertise and students and workers and all of that, together they will come together and they will be, if you like, those who govern the university together in a collaborative fashion. I want to suggest that that has broken down in many of our universities, partly because both because it creates confusions in terms of the people who are the working people in the university, the students in the university, the academics in the university, and if you like, the community people and the leaders who have a degree of ownership in this university. In one of the experiences that I've had in a community which felt a sort of ownership for the university, they were wanting this ownership to be not just as represented in the council, but also in the share of the budget of the university and where it was spent and how it was spent, etc. So in cases like those, the ideas of good governance become difficult really to define properly, because the council can easily become if you like, a theater, a place where there's competition for control of the resources, which is no different from what happens in our councils and in the politics of our country. So that good governance, that holding in balance, if you like, the balance between management and governance and leadership in the university is put at risk. The second thing I want to engage is leadership. Clearly, the idea of leadership is becoming an issue in our universities today. Who is the leader of the university? Is it the chairperson of council? Is it the chancellor of the university? Is it the vice-chancellor and the executive management of the university? Very, very often, these questions were intended to be, if you like, mutually reinforcing. But in reality, they are the means by which a dominant faction takes over and controls the university. And more, so-called members of council are not disinterested people in terms of what the university has to produce in its resources, in its budget, etc. It does seem again and again that there are people who expect to be employed at the university, but who are also, and therefore getting involved in tenders, but who are also the people who made determinations about the budget of the university. And this raises some fundamentally difficult questions which were never envisaged in the Act or in the White Paper number 3, never envisaged. And it is becoming a serious issue these days as to the control of the university. With that, and almost flowing from that, is how we determine the academic leadership of the university. The vice-chancellors, for example, how we appoint vice-chancellors becomes a very, very political matter that is very much transfixed in that ungovernability that I have just been referring to. So that at the end of the day, it becomes a matter who is the noisiest, if you like, in that engagement that is taking place at the university. And increasingly, what is it that we want in our Vice-Chancellor's academic and administrative leadership of the university? Where oftentimes that is where the breakdown has been, but almost always that breakdown is simply a symptom of a breakdown that is deeper in the university, in that balance that the Act had always intended should be held between the various spheres of operations of the university. So leadership is important. And I want to suggest that the curriculum and innovation that the university exists for in research and all the academic outputs of the university can become a casualty of that breakdown as well. So the creative and innovative thinking might itself be dictated to from elsewhere than from the academic instincts of the researchers and academics that are there. And how the resources of the university are actually spent and operated in order to advance the academic project can become a matter at issue as well. And I want to end there because I've gone a little bit 10 minutes longer than I had intended. But I want to leave it at that and allow us to engage as we are expected to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very, very much. That was a lot for us to consider and think about, and we really appreciate it. I want to encourage everybody, please, to pop some questions and comments into the chat, if you like. I've got some questions straight out. Barney, I want to start with the question you posed right from the beginning. You said that university, we can't spend enough funds and money on universities or on education in a broader sense. And given that university and education is a sure avenue for social justice for all, how then, why are we not doing that? Why are we not spending all we have on education in the primary, secondary, but in the tertiary sector particularly? Why are we holding back if we know this is a sure avenue for social justice in the country?
Let me just say, until more recently, maybe in the last 10 years, South Africa boasted of being, in our GDP, the highest provision that was made in the GDP was for education. For about 15 years of the first budgets of the government, education got the largest slice of the budget. But of course, other things have crept in. Right now, our sovereign debt is so much that it has become the largest slice that comes from our budget. The servicing of the sovereign debt has become important. But there is a question, of course, that is being asked. Is it true that education is the net effector of social justice? Is it in fact true when in our country young graduates are asking themselves the question, did my education matter if I can't find a job? Is there something that is missing here? Is it in fact true if those who come out of universities with education are unable to contribute to our economy, to our science and our economy, our industry sufficiently for them to be creators of new ideas and creators, if you like, of new industry for our society, and instead sit back and expect to be employed by somebody? Those are the hard questions that are being asked. The social justice element, we need to understand it as to what does it do. Does it create people who are much more caring, much more engaged with their communities and societies, rather than what we have at the moment? We've become a nation of rich and poor. How did we get here? How did it get to be the way it is today? Thank you.
Prophet, sorry, Prophet. Yeah, I just want, it links to your second, one of the points you made about the mismatch, the potential mismatch of curriculum and the lived lives of our graduates. And there is a mismatch between what they learn, how they learn, and how they engage in university, and then what is required in the real world, be that in terms of entrepreneurship, be that in terms of making their lives, be that in terms of staying in South Africa and feeding back at that level. Do you want to say a little bit about is there a mismatch of curriculum and what is required?
I think the current Minister of Higher Education, I think others as well, had long observed that for a variety of reasons, South Africa found itself on a trajectory that was privileging a particular kind of university education. That was theoretical, that was lacking in practicality, I suppose. And it took a long time for there to be a recognition that technicons and polytechnics, whatever they were called, are a very important element of higher education. And there was a scramble during Minister Kada Asmal's where technicons no longer wanted to be called technicons. They since became universities of technology. Wow, why it was that the formerly so-called comprehensive university soon became universities, and the technicon element was soon put in the back burner. Why it was that TVET colleges that are there were regarded as Cinderella institutions that the current Minister of Higher Education has been trying in vain to elevate to a position of creativity that this country needs desperately. And when you go to other countries, in particular Germany, there is a different element of more people going into what are called polytechnics and industry, and getting to know and being related between industry and the creative school than it would be the case otherwise. And we still have not got the mix right. Not even with NSFAS that has been engaged. Instead, it has created a situation where just about everybody wants to go to a so-called university. And many of them, and at the last time when I saw the figures, about just over 50% of those who come into our university actually finish their degrees within the time prescribed, with NSFAS or not. Now, that is a serious problem that our country needs to confront, that we are admitting people maybe as a result of social pressures or whatever it is, who really could have benefited from a robust polytechnic training that our country needs, which they themselves would have benefited from.
No, so that's the texturing of the system and how we award or reward people entering different streams. And it also has to do with how fluid the system is, that it's hard for people to enter on the one and, and move around. And so there's a rigidity in the system that is really difficult to break, in a sense. Prof, a question came in from Billy Adams earlier on, particularly about leadership, asking about what your take is on the unions and the political organizations that are getting themselves involved in governance, and that is perhaps posing a risk. And can you say a little bit about that?
It does. It was never intended to be like that. I mean, the idea of a collaborative governance system at a university. I mean, this government does that in schools as well. You know, GBS, what is it called? Governing body. The governing body and the teachers and all of that. It leads to contention about what the school is about. What is it intended to do? It leads to contention at universities because people come into that governance system with a variety of motives, and not a few of them have something to do with their desires and economic desires, etc., etc. So I do think that this whole system needs to be looked at again, and it's not hard to see diagnostically that as soon as more resources became available to university for infrastructure, etc., etc., then pressures came and certain people came to the university and stopped infrastructure development because certain so-called business people, mafias in the community, engaged and they want 30% of the cost of development. And this is what is happening at the University of Fort Hare. I was involved in Mangosuthu University of Technology residences for about a year. There could have been no movement because there was a demand that people who call themselves local people demanded it. It is true also that in too many of the places where there have been breakdowns in universities, members of council are actually involved in tenders at the university while they are members of council. Students are involved in tender entrepreneurs while they are students, and they benefit from that. And it is a matter that is very, very different. I mean, difficult. And it was never envisaged, it was never thought it would ever come to that. The problem is that how should the governance of the universities move forward? And I think, and one of the issues that behind this for me is that we need another commission on higher education to take account of the current problems almost 30 years on from the Commission on Higher Education, to say today, many of the things that in the anti-apartheid environment that we're operating with, actually, where are we? And we've hit a dead end at the moment. And the second thing that I think requires serious contention, why is it that we still have this day a kind of two-tier university system, the so-called privileged universities, and anything that is called historically Black universities? Why does that thing happen? Why is it that in our country today, if we say that the system is uniform, is one, why is it that we're getting fewer and fewer and less? In fact, we're getting few, if not no, white people attending universities where it would have been convenient to go to at Fort Hare, for example, in East London. It's not happening. So what we have done, we've entrenched exactly that which we wanted to change. It has not happened, and all the visions that we had of higher education in 1995, we have in fact discovered the unintended consequences of the policies that we put in place.
Yeah, this is very interesting, because I was about to ask you which policies stand out for you that had relevance in that context then and that need to be urgently overhauled. But just before you do that, there's, it's the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis that speaks precisely to that. As we recognize the world as it is, and we state it and we describe it, and so we also entrench how it is, and that is what you're describing. So when we recognize the different universities, we've kind of gone down that road, and now we have two different types of universities, the HDIs and so forth. But speak briefly about the policies. What stands out for you as one that you think this needs definite overhauling?
I made mention of how we've just not been able to grow the entrepreneurial, creative, industrial side of our country. Right now, there's a big move by the Department of Trade and Industry to grow what they call Black industrialists. We just have not been able to do that. I think the reason for that is that this is my own thinking. I think the reason for that is that we have created this idea of universities and university education that are about making money rather than becoming an entrepreneur, where education and qualifications are less about the humanizing of the people who are actually beneficiaries of the education that we find. If our education is much more humanized and human-oriented, people-oriented, we would be able to produce people who would go right out there and build communities. And I see a lot of that, by the way, with very little effort in India, which we just haven't been able to reach up to, including development and education for development. Once upon a time, we used to talk about education for liberation. It's about time that we talk about education for development in our day and age. So policy-wise, which are the policies? I think we need to revisit our academic policies, our curriculum, about relevance, about the country, whether it's the sciences, whether it's commerce, whether it's law, whether it's what. We need to critically look at those again, because I think right now we're looking at our curriculum with the lens of Europeanized South African education. I often say to those who are looking for radical ideas for transforming higher education, to say that we're still looking through the lens of so-called Western education.
But there's one question that came through to me, not on the general one, but they came through about if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about the whole sector and you could make it go away or come again, what is the one thing you would do if you were granted one wish about the sector?
If I were Minister of Higher Education for one day.
Exactly, you had a fairy, the higher fairy. Yeah.
You know, and I've struggled with this because I don't know why we do not do it more. We did away. One of the things that we did away as South Africa with that project that was called, what was it called now? Where people used to go and have work experience.
Service training, in-service training, or
in-service training. Yeah. If there's anything, I would require every student at university to spend time and to be afforded the opportunity to go out and work while they are studying in areas that are relevant. We can do it because there's a skills fund that is enormous amount of money. Skills fund was intended for that, so that students would be obliged to actually work integrated training and learning, so that becomes part of the curriculum. So that by the time students finish, you can't have a graduate who has no practical skills about entrepreneurship and commerce and law or science. But the problem is at the moment is that while there is a skills fund, we leave it to entirely, it seems, to industry and to be the ones who actually support and pay for apprenticeships. We need a system of apprenticeship of a universal kind in South Africa, which we don't have at the moment.
So, Prof, we're coming towards an end, and I'm just realizing that all our speakers, I always ask them about the magic question. So what was the one thing? And I think after 3 years of having engaged, I'm going to have a long list of what are the sort of key things that we should be changing in the sector. And your recommendation of improving the work integrated learning, thank you, Tanya, for that. The work integrated learning, the link to the industry, the link to relevance, the link to the here and now, the link to the local reality and lived experience, that needs to be improved. And we've heard that before. Other people have also said that. Prof, I want to thank you very, very much for your time and for your insights and for your looking back and giving us insights on what over the last 25 years, how far we've come and what still needs to happen, and perhaps where the areas are that we need to think very hard and very critically about, and our performance could be improved if we were to be a bit clearer on what we expect of the sector.
Thank you very much. For me, the word is that we need another commission to put all of these ideas together and move us forward.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think, other people have also said that. Prof, I want to thank you very, very much. And I want to thank everybody here in the room. We give you a round of applause, one of those silent Zoom applauses. I want to thank everybody here in the room, and I want to thank all our, in fact, it's been 2,286 people in the past year, 3 years, or I think it's been this year, that have registered for our events. So while we have perhaps 60 or 70 in the room here, we have equal amount of people downloading it and watching the recording the next day. So I want to thank everybody for being here. And those who listen to it later or watch it later, thanks very much to those as well.
Thank you.
I want to thank you, Prof. I want to thank also our helm management, Dr. Oliver Seal at USAf, for making this possible. I want to thank people in the background, Patrick Fish, Michelle Buchler, Tisetso, and others who make this possible. And without them, this wouldn't be possible. These conversations across the sector are very much needed. We can see them by the numbers of people who sign up, listen, and comment. Just for those who did pop comments in chat, I will send those chats off to Prof after the talk. So I thank you all, and I wish you a fantastic end of the year. We will not see each other until next year when we start in March with Engage. Until then, be well and have a healthy and happy and peaceful end of the year. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doc.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Same to you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.